Hey all, it's Mr. Kim. So this is going to be the start of Unit 3 and this is our first video. Unit 3 is pretty important because A, it's one of the largest chunks of the AP exam, and B, in Unit 3 we're setting up foundations for everything that we're going to talk about obviously in Unit 3 and also in Unit 4, which is another significant portion of the AP exam. In this video, we're going to be looking at the production function, which is the basis and it helps sets up, yet again, everything that we're going to be talking about in Units 3 and 4. And so because it's such serious business, there are no jokes for this unit. Let's get started.
All right, so the production function. And so with Unit 3, it's really divided into two major parts. The first part is production function, looking at all these different cost curves, looking at the average total cost, the long run ATC, and then we learn all this to set out what we're going to do in the second half of this unit, which is looking at perfect competition, our first real market structure. And so this in particular, right, we're starting off with a relatively simple concept with idea of inputs and outputs. And so obviously, right, to earn a profit, firms need to make products, which we're also going to call outputs, right? So an example, right, to earn a profit, what does Apple need to make? Well, Apple needs to make iPhones, iPads, Apple Pencils, whatever products they make, we're just going to call outputs, right? So all the iPads, MacBooks, all those things are called outputs for us. Inputs are the resources needed to make those outputs. So if we're going back to our Apple example, right, to make the MacBook, to make the iPad, what do they need? Well, they need glass for the screen. They need computer chips, right? So all those resources put together to create the finished iPad or the finished MacBook are called inputs. And we're also going to call them factors, right? And we already talked about factors, right, in Unit 1 with this idea of factors of production, right? So all the four factors of productions, right, are all input resources there. And so that leads us to the real production function, right? And so please note that none of these are any sort of cost curves that we're going to look at in perfect competition, but you still need to understand this. So the first thing that we're going to look at is total physical product. So total physical product is just the total output or quantity that is produced. So if I say, right, that I can produce 10 plastic balls, right, then my total physical product is 10 plastic balls. Right? If Miss Andrews can create 5 pencils, well then her total physical product is 5 pencils there. And so with production, we also get something called marginal product and average product. Marginal product, we have this really goofy definition here, the additional output generated by additional inputs. We also have our equation right here, where it's the change in total product over the change in inputs. However, marginal product is the same way that to calculate marginal product is the same way that we calculated marginal cost or marginal utility, right? So here, if we're looking at this example, we'll do this in blue, right? If our total product is 0, 1, 2, right? Then our marginal product is, we can't do for 0, but from 0 to 1 is 1, from 1 to 2 is 1, right? Our marginal product is just the difference between the total products there, from the first total product to the second total product produced. All right, so if we're going to use like slightly harder numbers here, right, just so we can further reiterate this concept, let's say 5 and 15. Well, our marginal product, right, for the first quantity is nothing, right, because 0, but the marginal quantity for the first quantity where we're producing 5 total products is going to be 5, right, from 0 to 5, and then from 5 to 15 is 10, so our marginal product is 10 units. And so like I said, to calculate marginal product, it's the same way we calculated marginal cost, the same way we calculated marginal utility in Unit 2. And then lastly is our average product, right? So our average product is the output per unit of input. In other words, we have this equation in green over here, right? It's just the total product divided by the units of labor, right? So if I can create 15 total units, but it only takes me two workers to do it, well then the average product is 7.5, right? It's just the total product divided by the units of labor, or in other words, the amount of workers. Then we're getting into the difference between fixed and variable resources. And so the difference here is fixed resources are resources that don't change with the quantity produced, right? That the amount of these resources are always going to be the same. While variable resources are resources that do change with the quantity produced. All right, so let's come up with an example, right? Let's say you're running a pizza shop. Well, what are some of the fixed resources for the pizza shop? Well, here, some of the fixed resources are the ovens, right? It's just the building itself, right? And so here, no matter how many pizzas you produce, you're always going to have the same amount of ovens. You're always going to have that same building, right? Of course, in the long run, it can change, right? But we're talking about a moment in time. So in that specific moment in time, no matter if you produce 1 pizza or 1,000 pizzas, you're always going to have the same number of ovens. You're always going to have the same building. Well, then what are our variable resources? What are some resources that the amount changes based on how many pizzas you produce? Well, here, right, these are just stuff like the cheese, right? So the actual ingredients needed, right? So the cheese, the pepperoni, I don't know how to spell pepperoni, so we're just going to label it pep, right? We could also say the onions. I'm a big fan of pineapple pizza, so pineapple, right? And bacon and ham, right? So here, right, if you make more pizzas, you are going to need more cheese, pepperoni, onions, pineapples, bacon, ham. You're going to need more ingredients to actually make the pizza. And dough is another thing. I forgot about the dough, right? And the tomatoes. Right? And so here, right, our variable resources are just the resources needed to actually produce the pizzas themselves. If you make 1 pizza, then obviously you need less cheese, you need less of these variable resources. But if you make 1,000,000 pizzas, you are going to need more of these ingredients needed to actually make the final product of a pizza. And so that leads us to our final concept before we move into sort of graphing, is going to be law of diminishing returns. All this law of diminishing returns says, right, is just as we add more workers to fixed resources, each worker is going to become less and less productive. And so that's why this last bullet point is just the idea of too many cooks in the kitchen, right? That eventually our total product and our marginal product is going to fall because workers or these variable resources are going to start to get in each other's way. So if you run a pizza shop, right, and let's say you have 100 workers, right, each of those 100 workers are not going to be efficient. They're going to start to get in each other's way when there's only like 2 ovens in the pizza shop, right? So yet again, it's just the idea of too many cooks in the kitchen, that as we add more variable resources to fixed resources, the marginal and total product is going to start to fall. And so this leads us to our last sort of thing, which is graphing production. So we talked about total product, marginal product, average product. So what do all these curves look like? Well, here, right, it's important to know the curves, but it's more important to know the 3 stages of return. We have stage 1, which is increasing marginal returns, stage 2, which is decreasing marginal returns, and stage 3, which is negative marginal returns. So stage 1. So if you notice here, right, we have our total product, we have our average product in green, and our quantity of labor in blue. And so if you notice, right, this area in green right here represents increasing marginal returns. And so if you notice, right, our marginal product is increasing rapidly. Our total product is also increasing. And so why? Well, it's because of specialization. As we add more workers initially, right, they can divide up the task. And as they divide up the task, they become more efficient and are able to produce more total product. And each additional worker is bringing more and more to the table. And so that's why our marginal product here is increasing. And that's why our total product is increasing at an increasing rate. And what we mean by increasing at an increasing rate is that the slope is just very, very steep, right? And so here, right, eventually we are going to hit a point where if we hire more workers, each worker is going to be less efficient, right? The marginal product is going to start to fall. And so that's when we get to stage 2. And so stage 2 here is in yellow, and that's decreasing marginal returns. And so if you notice, right, our marginal product, which is in blue right here, right, is decreasing. Our total product, however, is still increasing, but it's increasing at a decreasing rate, meaning the slope is more flat. And so while we're still producing more products, we're not producing as many products as before. And so here, why, right? Why does this happen? Why is our marginal product falling? And why is our total product still increasing, albeit at a slower rate? Well, it's because of fixed resources. Because workers have already specialized in that first stage, increasing marginal returns, eventually we get to a point where we hire too many workers and they start to get in each other's way. And so each worker, as of this point, can only specialize so much, and so the marginal product, or what each worker brings to the table, is less and less and less. The other thing, the last thing I want to point out is that notice that when our marginal product is at zero, so when our marginal product is at zero, right, our total product is at its peak. Meaning, as soon as our marginal product dips below the x-axis and becomes negative, our total product is going to start to fall. Right? So you have to know when our marginal product intersects with the x-axis, or in others, when our marginal product is zero, our total product is going to be at its peak. And so this leads us to our third stage, negative marginal returns, and this is in red over here. And so if you notice, right, our marginal product is now below the x-axis, it's negative. And so when our marginal product is negative, our total product is also going to start decreasing here. And so why? Well, we hired too many workers. At this stage, we have too many workers hired, and they're starting to get in each other's way. And so this should make sense, right? As we hire more workers, right, eventually each worker is going to add negative returns, right? They're actually going to start taking away from the total product, which means our marginal product becomes negative, which means our total product actually starts to decrease, actually starts to fall. And so here, right, we have this little practice. So I want you guys to pause the video for a second and try to fill in this marginal product and the average product thing. And then we'll go over it together. All right, so for marginal product, right, remember we said it's just the difference between the total products here. So obviously, right, for the zeroth worker is producing zero products, so our marginal product is really not available, right? There's zero. Well, from the zero to the first worker, we see that the first worker added or made 10 total products. So our marginal product here is 10. Well, at the second worker, we know that both workers created 25 total products. But if we're looking for marginal product, we're trying to figure out, well, how much additional product did that second worker bring in by himself or herself? Well, here, we just have to look at the difference between 10 and 25. We know that if one worker was able to bring in or produce 10 units by himself or herself, and two workers were able to produce 25 workers by working together, well, we know that the second worker brought in an additional 15 products. And then we do from 2 to 3, right, which we get to 20. Then 3 to 4, right, we go to 15. Right, from 4 to 5, we go to 10. From 5 to 6, 70, 75, so we go to 5. 6 to 7, we go to 0. And 7 to 8, we hit -5 here, right? And so if we're going to clean this up a little bit, this is what it should look like. And so that leads us to our average product. So remember, our average product equals, right, the total product divided by the number of workers here. And so here, our first worker is pretty simple when we're trying to figure out the average product, right? It's just 10 divided by 1, which gets us to 10, right? For the second worker, right, the total product is 25. We have two workers here. So 25 divided by 2, right, gets us to 12.5. Then we do 45 divided by 3, which gets us to 15. 60 divided by 4, which gets us to 15 again. 70 divided by 5, which gets us to 12. 75 over 6, which I don't want to do that one in my head, right? Then we get to 75 over 7, and finally 70 over 8. Right? And so hopefully, right, you guys got the right answers there. And if you want to check it, here are the correct answers on the graph here. So here, right, if you notice, there are 3 highlighted sections on our marginal product, average product sort of chart here. In green, right, we have from units 1 to 3, or workers 1 to 3, and we're going to say this is going to be stage 1. In yellow is going to be stage 2, and in red is going to be stage 3. So remember, we talked about with our graphs that there are 3 stages to our total product, marginal product, average product curves. That stage 1 is increasing marginal returns. That as total product increases, our marginal product also increases here. Why? Well, because of specialization. And so here, right, if you notice, is this happening? Well, yes, because our total product increased, right, from 10, 25 to 45, that's increasing numbers. And our marginal product is also increasing, right? An increase from 10 to 15 to 20. And so that's why this first stage is increasing marginal returns. Both total product and marginal product are increasing. Well, stage 2 in yellow is decreasing marginal returns. That's when we said our total product is still increasing, albeit at a slower rate. However, our marginal product is now decreasing. Why? Well, because of diminishing marginal returns. We're adding too many cooks into the kitchen. And so here, is this true? Is our total product still increasing? Well, yes, right? Our total product is still increasing, 60 to 70 to 75. But what happens to our marginal product here? Well, our marginal product is decreasing, right? We went from 15 to 10 to 5 to 0. And so if we notice here, our total product is still increasing while our marginal product is decreasing, and that's why this is stage 2, or decreasing marginal returns. And then lastly, we hit stage 3. Stage 3 is just negative marginal returns. When our marginal product is negative, it goes below the x-axis, and our total product starts to fall. Well, is this true? Well, yes, because from the 7th to the 8th, we went from 75 total product to 70, right? So that obviously decreased there. And then our marginal product is negative 5, so that obviously indicates, right, that it's below the x-axis. It is a negative number. And so that's why it is negative marginal returns. And so that's it. Practice AP questions. We're going to go over these in class, right? So there isn't really going to be a separate video on these practice AP questions. So hopefully you guys paid attention in class to these 2 practice AP questions here. All right, so that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys learned a lot, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.